That one. Okay, we are recording. John, how are you today?
I'm well. I'm in Brooklyn, and the weather is moderately warm, but pleasant. So yeah, everything's fine over here.
Lovely, lovely. Tell me about this room because I'm looking over your shoulder and I can see what looks like either vintage flight cases or vintage suitcases. Or what am I looking at and
Right.
where are you?
Okay. Well, you're seeing my collection of woodwinds that are stacked up in my little office
Fantastic.
here. So we've got this is a C melody saxophone. That is a tenor saxophone. I don't know what else you can see, but there's an alto sax, there's a soprano sax, and there's a clarinet. That's what I've got behind me on the wall there.
Glorious, glorious. Well, let's start your playlist, John. And I always ask guests to tell me the song they regard as having the greatest ever intro, please.
Yes, well, that's one of those extremely loaded questions because it presupposes that you can rank things.
Okay.
Now, of course, I'm being a little bit of a contrarian here, but I do think my number one least favorite thing is ranking stuff.
Hmm.
On the long list of things that I don't like, the top number one thing is ranking things.
Okay.
You see where I'm going. So the music is all beautiful and it's all apples and oranges and so on. However, when you ask the question, what's the song with the greatest intro? Um, I just all I could think of was this song I used to hear on the radio on the underground radio station when I was a kid, called "Watermelon Man" by Herbie Hancock, which has an intro that is so alien and startling, especially for young ears, as mine were. It just had no idea what I was hearing, and I was really drawn to it, and also kind of scared of what it was. Um, so I picked that one as the best intro. It starts out really weird, and then it gets a bit more normal and more like 70s fusion
Hmm.
music, although still creative and interesting. So Watermelon Man by Herbie Hancock. That was my choice.
Fantastic. John, tell me a little bit about how you as a songwriter create so I guess I'll rephrase that. The way that sort of technology has moved in the time from when you started, they might be giants to now, the way that so many people get the music is in a far different way to buying records and buying tapes and CDs
Yes.
back then. And we're seeing kind of bands utilizing things like TikTok and things like that to get their music out there in almost bite-sized sort of snippets, and also the streaming services. Now, the world is saturated in music that is at your disposal and at your fingertips so quickly with the likes of Spotify and stuff. And we're now seeing that um, there seems to be, rather than sort of getting on the radio now, there seems to be lots of attention on sort of trying to get on the right playlists on Spotify and things like this for bands. I just wonder, all of these things that have kind of moved in the market and changed, like how much of that filtered through. It's a long-winded question, this, but bear with me, mate.
Okay, I'm with you.
But there's also, it feels like with Spotify, unless you've got them in 5 seconds, like you're going to lose them because they're constantly telling you what else there is to listen to. So
Sure.
how much of that, if at all, filters through into yours and John's creative process?
I suppose John Flansburgh probably thinks harder about that kind of thing just because he naturally has been the kind of the person interested in marketing what we're doing and packaging it. But I think he's also like me, he has an old school kind of a perspective on it, which is we want to do something that we like, and we don't want to distort it into something that's strictly about trying to get people's attention. And we've been doing that for the last 40 years, more or less. So I think we're aware of the idea. I mean, in some ways we're obviously uh, the influence of the structure of pop songs that were created with that idea in mind has trickled down to us, so that inevitably, we like those songs that grab you, but partly because we were grabbed by them at an early age, and not maybe as much in a calculating way.
Yeah.
I think we like the songs that we grew up listening to, and we want to pretend we are continuing that tradition, even though, as you point out, the rules have significantly changed
Sure.
since then.
Sure. John, tell me the first song you remember hearing that had an emotional impact on you, please.
Impact. Yeah, another good question. I sort of thought hard about the emotional impact aspect, and I think that one distinct memory I have from early childhood was it's very specific. It was going to the beach in New York. Jones Beach is a beach on Long Island that my family went out to in the mid 60s. And I remember hearing a song by a group called The Happenings, and it was called See You in September. And it had that quality of, very musical song, but also with a lyric that was about this notion of, well, the summer is coming, but are you still going to be there for me when the fall comes around?
Yeah.
And particularly for someone in school, it's kind of that vibe. And so it definitely affected me. And I remember hearing it out of a probably transistor radio on the beach, and it kind of drilling into me in a way. That's the one that came to mind.
If you had to pinpoint the emotion, what was it?
I think I was mainly excited by the music, but then the words kind of inform the feeling of it. Uh, it's a very old-fashioned song, even for that time. I think it felt like pre-Beatles kind of songwriting and arranging, but nonetheless, compelling.
Yeah. It's a great name for a band as well.
The Happenings. Yeah.
Tell me, please, for the next track, John, the song that reminds you of your time at school, please.
Okay. Well, so in high school, now I have to say by the time I was in high school, I had probably kind of a more antagonistic relationship to what was on the radio. By that time, I kind of felt like most of it was not speaking to me. And, so we rode the school bus from where I lived in Lincoln, Massachusetts. The bus took us to high school in Sudbury, Massachusetts. And so for some reason, that particular bus driver always played the AM radio. So every morning, I'd listen to basically the top 40 on the radio, WRKO, with Dale Dorman was the DJ. And most of the songs just annoyed the hell out of me. But this one by Blue Swede, Hooked on a Feeling, I don't know. It's such like an antic and crazy arrangement. And I guess it was that guy Jonathan King had originally done this arrangement, and the Blue Swede were sort of covering his arrangement, because neither one of them originated the song. But it was Jonathan King who, as you know, later on got into all kinds of trouble.
Yeah.
And but before all of that happened, he championed They Might Be Giants when we got to Britain. So we actually met Jonathan. I didn't associate him with that song Hooked on a Feeling at that point,
Sure.
or I would have mentioned it to him.
Yeah.
That was a song that I remember, particularly the Ooga Chugga
Yeah.
background chorus.
Great intro.
Very, very weird. But obviously, it worked. The song got across.
You said something, in regards to the stuff that you was hearing on the radio on the bus and stuff wasn't talking to you. What had you discovered at this point that had kind of like pricked your attention? And had you found your tribe by then? Had you found your thing?
Yeah. Well, I found a tribe. I don't know whether it was where I'd say I had not settled particularly, and I have to tell you, I'm not proud of the music I was into when I was 14, but it obviously was taking me off into a new direction. My brother had introduced me to the work of Frank Zappa, and so that was one of the first things that was really off the graph that I was attracted to, and particularly just his production and arrangement stuff. I think that eventually the subject matter and the lyrics started to put me off, and I didn't feel like he was really speaking to me in that way. But I always liked his extremely diverse, eclectic kind of musicianship. That was really interesting to me. And there was stuff like that. And eventually, I guess probably before I finished high school, I was introduced to what would become known as punk rock and new wave music, and those things were looming large for me by that time.
Did you enjoy school?
Yeah, I guess not. No, I mean, I got some things out of it. I joined the concert band, playing woodwinds. As you see, I'm still a committed woodwind player.
Yep.
So that was the beginning. I played the bass clarinet in my high school concert band. That just seemed like something that it just there was something very appealing about it. I couldn't even quite articulate what it was, but I just it was something I wanted to do. And then aside from the ordinary academic work, I was never a particularly talented student, and it was a bit of an endurance test, I would say.
Did you know what you wanted to be when you was at school?
I think by the end of high school, I was very interested in music, but before that, I was drawing cartoons. That was kind of the my first artistic love, I would say.
I mean, whether it's art or like drawing or making music, they're both ridiculously tough industries to get into, let alone create a career that's lasted the time that your career has lasted.
Yeah.
I'm interested to know. Are you a very sort of driven individual?
I'm pretty lazy, and I just have had outrageous good fortune. In First of all, I mean, as you say, I chose a discipline to get into that probably made my parents worry about like how I was going to feed myself and so on. It was not a very clever career move. Um, but I was really lucky in that I hooked up with someone who was, I'd say, much more thoughtful and ambitious in terms of trying to figure out a way to sustain a career, not so much become a superstar, but just keep doing it, keep doing something he loves, which was the John Flansburgh, my partner. He was just much more tuned in to ways that you could market yourself and still feel like you had ownership of what you were doing, and still feel like it was original and fun, and was you were doing it for the reason you originally gotten into it, right? That it didn't just become a sort of showbiz grind.
Absolutely. Tell me the first record that you bought.
Okay, well, actually, this is sort of a lie because I did not buy this record, but I was with somebody who bought it when we were both very young. And I didn't really buy a whole lot of records right off the bat. I actually can't remember the first. Well, the question is the first song that I bought. And I remember the first album that I bought, which was a Frank Zappa album. But my friend and I went to the record store, and he bought this 45 of the Alice Cooper track Elected. And I guess the reason I chose that was it's another kind of startlingly great arrangement, and a bit of songwriting, which contains all these elements that I was busily trying to copy when I started writing songs. It modulates, which means the key is shifting in the middle of the song, and that to me was just really exciting and compelling. Hearing the way the music was arranged. The lyrics are pretty stupid, and Alice Cooper was definitely enthusiastically into very dumb song ideas, which I don't fault that. I mean, it works. It's a great single. But mainly, I loved hearing all the melodic lines behind the vocal and the way the vocal works against the rhythm and the chords, and there's a horn section. It's just to me is a really beautiful track.
Yeah. Tell me what drew you, because just to go back to that what you said about the stuff that was on the radio, and then you mentioned like new wave and punk,
Yeah.
and obviously Alice Cooper. However dumb some of his lyrics may be, he looked really exciting. If you're a young lad, then Alice Cooper looked really cool and fun, and obviously Frank Zappa was, but absolutely bananas. Like, was you always drawn to the kind of not left field, but the more interesting, exciting things as a young lad?
I think I was influenced by number one, my older brother's tastes, and number two, listening to the aforementioned underground radio station in Boston, which was WBCN. They just had a very open-ended. It was clear that the DJs were picking the tracks.
Yeah.
There was not a playlist for them to follow. They were off on all their own adventures. And so that was a great education for me. This was in the mid 70s. Yeah, no, I mean that was the main thing. I think I also, I got into J.S. Bach from hearing the Wendy Carlos switched on Bach music, and that, I mean, I'm still a massive Bach fan. So I just wanted to go in all directions and explore, and it wasn't just about things that were transgressive necessarily, like Alice Cooper.
Sure.
It was just discovering interesting things in it. And John Flansburgh had the same perspective. He loved hearing something new and unheard of. So we were both on that track.
And I think that period towards the sort of mid to late 70s, I think sometimes kind of gets overlooked as to being so important in music, because certainly in the UK, I watch old episodes of Top of the Pops that they rerun.
Yeah.
And you'll look at one from like 78 and 79, and it'll have the sort of the tail end of disco, and then you'll have like the sort of evolution of like ska music in the UK. You'd be seeing
Right.
like Madness and all these like really cool looking bands like Dexys, all these bands that look like Gang. And then you'd see like the Jam, and you'd sort of get the punk going into the post punk, and then you was getting the kind of early kind of Gary Newman sort of the synth pop thing that was starting to explode in the UK as well. It's just like a
Sure.
little sort of 3 years where I think there were so many genres of music
Yeah,
all just
yeah.
popping.
It is startling to consider how fast and furious the scene was changing at that time. And I mean, I feel like an old man now, but I'm not really tuned into anything that's been as dramatically evolving since then. That
Yeah.
was, that I was, and I mean, it was certainly true in my early childhood. I was maybe less aware of what all the threads were, but hearing AM radio in the 60s, there were all these different things being played in the same top 10. There's Motown, and there was British Invasion, and so it had been exciting even well before the mid 70s. But yeah, you're right. It was a time when we were teenagers, and uh really we were really hungry for new stuff, constantly hearing new stuff, and it was like the culture was complying. It was
Yeah.
it was providing all this great uh rapid change.
And obviously punk was such a big part of that, certainly in the UK, like in the sort of, the 77, 78. But what was your sort of experiences of punk in the States,
Right.
and
Yeah,
being
yeah.
in your sort of formative years?
Yeah, well, so I had a good friend who was an avid music aficionado, and he introduced me and Flansburgh to a great many things as they were emerging. He was the first person to play us the Ramones. There was some TV show in America where they were tracking it was a weekend news show, but they had all sorts of cultural stuff. And one of the things they had was a special about the Sex Pistols. Here's this new thing happening in Britain. It's violently, anarchistic, and they actually showed a clip of Johnny Rotten singing "God Save the Queen" in the studio. So we were paying attention to that as it was like, wow, this is like crazy. This is really exciting. And it made us think about not just where we were, but the stuff happening all internationally as well. I think that
Yeah,
was part of the excitement.
fantastic. I'm going to ask you now to tell me the song that soundtracked your years clubbing. Was you a clubber?
Yes. Well, it's an incredibly presumptuous
It
question.
is.
I laughed pretty hard when I saw that because I don't think I could ever describe any time in my life as my clubbing years. But John and I did play in downtown New York a lot, and we'd occasionally hang out in the places we were playing. And there was this great place called the Pyramid Club that was mostly staffed by drag queens. Um, this was in the early 80s. And so, you just go there and hang out. And I think I maybe actually did dance at one point, possibly to the music. One of the things I remember in particular was this instrumental track called Cavern by Liquid Liquid. There was a period when all the bands had to be a word repeated. That was the flavor of that moment. Every band was the same word spoken twice, which we considered and rejected that idea, but but we were putting our band together at the same time. This, as you may know, this instrumental, it was a big club hit in New York in the early 80s. I'm not sure what year. And then it was semi-covered by Melly Mel for a even more popular song called White Lines. Um, and Yeah, that was so, the bass line became even more famous as part of this hip hop recording.
Fantastic record, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Like, I hadn't heard it for a few years, and when you sent your tracks over, I went and listened to it again. And an Optimo by Liquid Liquid's a great track as well. They've got some fantastic records,
Uh-huh. Yep, yep.
yeah, great choice, great choice. Okay, for track 6, John, I'm going to take you home, and I'm going to ask you to tell me a favorite song from an artist from your home county, please.
Right. So home county to me, strictly speaking, it should be Kings County. This is where I currently live. Brooklyn, New York is also Kings County, New York State. But there were just too many. I just didn't feel like I could come up with something from there. So this track is from the county where I spent my adolescence. 10 years in Lincoln, Massachusetts. The county is Middlesex County in Massachusetts, and I was pleased to see. I looked at the map to make sure that Mr. Jonathan Richman was indeed from the same county, and I can confirm that I think he's from Natick, Massachusetts. In any case, this is a song by Jonathan Richman, who was made famous. He famously had a hit in the UK with Roadrunner.
We did.
But this is the song "I'm Straight" by
Yeah.
Jonathan Richman.
I mean, John, tell the listeners a little bit about that track, because it's nowhere near as instantly infectious as Roadrunner. It's
Yeah, yeah, no, I know. It's a more of a connoisseur's Jonathan Richman song, I think.
yeah.
There's a lot of great Jonathan Richman to go through. I mean, he's continued writing and recording for longer than we have. Um, and there's plenty of stuff there. I think I'm Straight, I just thought was such a great it was a great expression of his particular personality. It's not about being gay. In fact, he wrote another song called I Was Dancing at the Lesbian Bar that is a celebration of lesbian bars that everybody should check out. But I'm Straight is actually about how he's not high. And that was the point of the song. He's not stoned. And I guess the point is that the person he's who with whom he's competing for the attention of a particular romantic partner is a stoner. And so he's trying to say, look, hippie Johnny is stoned. I'm not stoned. I'm the one you want to be with. And that's really it.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, look, it's your last track, John, and you can play tastemaker or influencer, as I believe the kids call it these days. And I'm going to ask you to tell the listeners a song that you think many may not know that you would like them to hear, please.
Yes. Well, for this selection, I've chosen the song Bad Boy by the Jive Bombers. I don't know who's heard of. I actually don't know how popular this song is. I think it was included on a movie soundtrack, and that may have brought it to some people's attention. But it's really, to me, it was a very obscure song from the 50s. And the thing that's really remarkable is this singer, Clarence Palmer, has such a inexplicable and bizarre way of singing. He does this sort of vowel sound at the end of whenever he sings the chorus. He does a really weird thing with his voice, and he does it on other tracks as well. I mean, it's clearly it was something he was considered as his like signature move. It's not clear at all what he's getting at, but it's very beautiful, and the song itself is great. I mean, I love everything about it.
Fantastic. We'll make it nice and easy for people to go and listen to that, John, and all your other choices, because we put together a little Spotify playlist to accompany this episode so people can go and listen to all of the songs that we've spoken about.
Excellent.
And we've been speaking about lots of other great music, and it feels fitting now to start talking about some great music, which is They Might Be Giants. So tell me what's happening. Well, I know you're coming to the UK. I know that. But aside from that, what else is happening?
Well, aside from that, we're also we're touring here. We're leaving this week to go up to Minneapolis and other cities around here, and then we're gonna be coming, as you said, to the UK and also to Australia in the fall, doing full-blown tours of both of those countries. We have actually got an entire, pretty much, I think, a finished album in the can now, but we're not going to be releasing that until we're done promoting, doing these shows. It just won't be ready before then. But people can look out for that at the end of this year. We spent a couple of years working on it because everything is kind of slowed down in terms of our touring and stuff. So we've had lots of time to be in the studio writing and recording, and I think we've done another bang up job, I hope. So there will be a whole new album out by the end of this year, I think.
Oh, fantastic. And John, if people want to keep up to speed with all things They Might Be Giants, releases, tour dates, etc., where's the best place to do so?
DepecheMode.com.
Hey, I'm from Basildon. They're my hometown heroes.
Yeah. No, I can't take credit for that joke. That is John Flansburgh's signature joke when asked where to look for our stuff. Obviously,
I'm going to go back and listen now because I had other John on the podcast about 3 years ago. So I'm going to go back and see if John done that then.
He may well have made that exact joke. I think it to me it never gets old. It's a eternally funny joke. But the real answer, of course, is theymightbegiants.com, and you can just Google They Might Be Giants and you'll find all the different places to check out what we're up to. There's also a brilliant site called the TMBG Wiki, and they have listed every single gig we've ever played and set list for every gig and list of every song we've ever recorded. It's an incredibly comprehensive site about They Might Be Giants that we're not in charge of. We actually go there and try to, so when we're trying to remember what we played last time we were in a particular place.
Oh, that's fantastic. I will add the link to that in the show notes of this as well, then, so listeners can go and explore that. John, it's been an absolute delight talking records with you. Thank you so much for giving up your time.
My pleasure. Nice talking to you. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in person.
Absolutely. I'm going to press stop and don't go anywhere.
Okay.